talk a lot about AI, but the nitty-gritty is something a lot of us don't know about.
AI in different forms will always be there.
AI, I think that India is all set to be a global leader.
Namaskar and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Rajit, your host today, and this is the first part of a series we are planning on artificial intelligence. So, AI is the new buzzword. So, we thought we'll have a series on AI, discussing various facets of AI and how AI will help us to achieve the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister of a Viksit Bharat 2047. So, without going into further details, we will first introduce our guests. We have changed the format, we've kind of like to have it in a podcast informal format. So, I will ask the guests today to introduce themselves.
My name is PJ Nath. I work in a satellite communication services company called Nelco.
You're the head of Nelco.
I am the managing director and CEO for Nelco. We are not satellite communication service, not purely into artificial intelligence, but then we thought it's an interesting topic where we could explore how satellite communication, industry is getting leveraged from artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence also leveraging from a lot of things that are satellite technology is offering. So it's a mix of both.
So you're head of Nelco, which is a Tata enterprise.
That's correct.
And Nelco deals only with satellite technology.
Correct. So we deal only with satellite communication. The satellite has got a fairly broad spectrum. We are into satellite communication, which means that we provide communication services in the country, both for enterprise, for maritime communication, for aircraft communication, where we offer communication services to our users. So that's what we do.
And what has your journey been? You're an engineer by profession?
Yeah, I'm an MBA. I'm from Punhani.
Okay.
I have worked in the IT industry. I was a part of Wipro in my initial years. Then I've been part of telecom world. Okay. I've been part of CFID and been part of Tata Communication, and now moved to satellite communication. Okay. So I've been put to IT, telecom overall, and now into satellite communication.
Okay. And what about you, Nitin?
I am a lawyer. I'm a regulatory and a policy lawyer. I focus mostly on infra, which is infrastructure, and particularly on technology, telecommunications and energy. And I'm also a dual qualified lawyer. I'm a barrister of England and Wales. And this area of specialization is technology, and as you know, the technology has been evolving. So although India doesn't have a specific AI law, but what I bring onto the table is the experience that we've had as the technology has evolved on the regulatory and the legal side in India.
So you fought cases for the telecom companies or for the telecom ministry, or against the or related to TRAI?
Yes. So when I talk about regulatory, so these are matters where it's the interstate dispute between the operators, we call them licensees or service providers, and the dispute between the government as well as the private operators. So I have mostly represented the private operators. Now private operators could be from the NLD, ILD operators as we call them. They are the backbone of the telecommunication network to access service providers, the mobile telecommunication operators, and to the satellite service providers as well.
Okay, so you've also been in the dispute over spectrum?
Yes, over spectrum, then over license fee, all kinds of telecommunication related disputes. I've been party to that.
Okay, so first we'll just discuss a little about AI, and then we'll get into the regulation, because what I understand is, as of today, your telecom regulation has quite a bit to do with the current regulation for AI. I may be wrong, but that's how I understand it. So, so in your let's start with Pradeep. In your view, for me, like, what is the difference between AI plus X, and generative AI? Because mostly what I have understood up till now is that most of the applications we are using right now, and what the Niti Aayog strategy is that in the public policy space, we are trying to improve our systems, and like the Honorable Prime Minister has also said, AI for all. So, we are trying to improve our delivery systems, be it in health, education, nutrition, transfer of benefits for the poor. We are trying to improve our delivery systems through AI. But lot of this means just enhancing the efficiency of our delivery systems, which may be a little different from pure AI as we understand it, and different from generative AI. So, can you just explain in very simple terms for our viewers, what is the difference between them?
Artificial intelligence, in a very simple terms, is a field of computer science which deals with doing work which requires human intelligence without the human being. So that is what artificial intelligence is. Right? This is a very simple form.
It's basically then intelligence without a human being.
Correct. So it can do whatever the human being does in terms of problem solving, decision making, natural language processing, etc. Right. To give an example, even in a satellite network or in a telecom network, the network management, the network traffic management is something that can be done by artificial intelligence, right? Because you don't require human being. If an artificial intelligence module is done properly, it can do the entire traffic management on its own. So that's one example.
For example, you have these in the orbit you have many satellites, and right now you avoid them colliding through human intervention.
Yeah, so that is, I was not getting, I was saying, let's look at from a pure network perspective.
Okay.
In network, there's a data traffic happening, right? There will be congestion at different points in time, different incidences, etc. Right?
Okay.
So in that case, how does the network get altered, or how does it change its course of traffic movement, etc.
Okay.
So that can be done.
Which you're talking about data network?
It can be data network. It could be data network, any network on which data is flowing. It could be ultimately even voice is going as data packets now.
Could it be a telephone network?
It could be a telephone network. It could be a terrestrial network. It could be a satellite network. It could be anything.
Let's say telephone network, because that is easier. At least everyone will understand a telephone network. Okay.
Yeah. So in today's telephone world, which is completely IP driven, when the traffic management can be done through an artificial intelligence solution. So that's possible to do that. You talked of generative IT. Before that, it is also something called machine learning. Machine learning is normally a module which will be using data sets, existing data sets, and keep improving on that. To give an example, for any device or any equipment, the predictive maintenance, if there's a machine learning module put there, based on the data which has been generated over a period of time, it can be trained to predict the failure of that device. Okay, so that's the thing. Generative AI, on the other hand, is normally that field which deals with generating new content. Right? It could be text, it could be videos or whatever. So I think that's the.
So ChatGPT is generative AI.
If I were to look at a report generation, okay, the report generation would be a generative AI thing, whereas network management is artificial intelligence, predictive and predictive maintenance could be machine learning, but generating reports would be generative IT. Just to give a perspective.
Machine learning is a little easier to understand. It's basically learning like we learn. A machine learns from the data available, and he learns as he progresses.
Yeah.
But AI, when you say generative AI, like ChatGPT, if we give them a command and say, okay, you make a speech for some dignitary. So that is generative AI?
The way I see it is that generative AI is a subset of AI, so it's part of AI. And it is basically to generate new and original content. It is not a search engine which just picks up something. It's a new and original content. I think that's the key, right? So therefore, it could be text, it could be music, it could be video, it could be any of that.
So generative AI means new content.
Yeah, subset of AI which is generating new content, new and original content. So when I give an example for the telecom or a satellite network, say network simulation report or a or a report generation, that's completely new. I mean, it's not picking up from a database of this thing and try to do it.
So that is generative.
That's what I thought was the point.
Okay,
maybe it
the
was
difference.
missing.
Okay, okay.
And it's a part of AI. So when we say AI as a whole,
so generative AI is a part of AI.
Yeah, similar machine language is a part of AI. That's right.
Driverless car. That is artificial intelligence because it has to.
That's a pure form of artificial. Absolutely.
Because it has to solve a problem. It has to make a decision.
Absolutely.
Without
that's
human
the absolute artificial intelligence, because they have the autonomous car has to behave as if it has been driven by a human being, and a human being will look at the different things that's happening on the road and take the decision. And you cannot predict. You can't create a model to say that, look, how many incidences can you really program? It's not possible, right? So I think that's the AI. And to my mind, I think that will keep on improving as in when it gives more and more data. So ultimately, all these artificial intelligence solutions will require a lot of data, which will be continuously processed to be able to make the models finer and stronger.
So Nitin, then from driverless cars, because that is, I think, a little easier to understand. So that the question has arisen is that who will be responsible for suppose there's an accident in a driverless car. So who will be responsible for that? And that is why we need some kind of law, some kind of regulation in, like, if things go wrong. Now, for example, like in the recent incident in Lebanon. Now, suppose it happens here, one can say that it was done by agencies, but suppose it happens on a personal level. It's not between two different agencies who are in any way, in any case, adversaries. But suppose, for example, in the cameraman's pocket, his phone explodes. Okay, then how will the law be able to identify who is responsible, and what kind of regulation is there? So could you first just give your views on AI, and then a little about why regulation is required, and which all countries and agencies have come up with regulations?
Right. So on that responsibility part, accountability.
First, can you say what do you understand by AI?
Regulatory perspective. Okay, let me just first talk from a common man's perspective. There are two essential elements of AI. One is autonomy, and the second is human intelligence. So human intelligence would imply human faculties of reading, of seeing and comprehending, and then generating actions, which is a reflexive action. Now, AI is difficult to define. It's not just about India, but internationally also, except for few countries who have been able to give a categorical definition of AI. It's very difficult with the technology evolving to define AI in strict sense. Like when you were having a chat with Mr. Nath on ChatGPT, ChatGPT currently, if I'm not mistaken, is on 4.0 version. So ChatGPT has evolved from what it was essentially when it started. And even the makers, I'm sure, do not know where is the end destination of ChatGPT. So AI comes with a whole lot of autonomy and human intelligence that has no limits. So as far as defining or from the regulatory perspective is concerned, the European Union AI Act, which is one of the first and probably the only comprehensive AI law or legislation which is in place, and I suppose that will get implemented somewhere in 2026, although the law is in place, that defines AI as a machine system which emulates human intelligence.
Okay. So that's a legal definition.
Legal. So it's not the exact definition that I'm saying, but it is something that relates AI to human intelligence or a high level of intelligence. And as far as India is concerned, we also have a very similar thing in AI principles that India has come out with. Those also talk about human intelligence. So AI somewhere in current form is being linked to human intelligence. We've had artificial intelligence previously as well. So we are like inundated with artificial intelligence. If I give you an example, the recommendations that you get when you're surfing or going through videos on Instagram, the recommendations that come to you, that has a level of artificial intelligence, because there is no human intervention. There is a human intervention in conceptualizing the software and feeding the data into that, but it's also on its own collecting the data, processing it, and then serving it B-scope depending on the audience's preferences.
B-scope?
So B-scope is customization. What we don't understand now, the entire advertising on internet is mostly customized. We call it B-scope advertising, where they are profiling us. So the apps that we are downloading on our phone is profiling our behavior, and basis that it is mapping out what are our preferences at what point in time, and accordingly the ads are being served to us. Similarly are the recommendations for the videos that are coming. So there is an intelligence involved there, and that intelligence is outside the human intelligence, which we call as artificial intelligence. It may not have a complete mind of its own as we see now, the way AI is evolving, but then it is artificial intelligence, and we have had multiple examples, as Mr. Nath also indicated, on the telecommunication side. So interestingly, something that I was speaking to Mr. Nath before the interview was about machine to machine. A lot many people wouldn't know that India has a regulatory framework when it comes to machine interaction, which is where you rule out the human part in the communication system.
Okay. So what is that regulatory network?
So we call it M2M. There is a guidelines for obtaining registration for M2M services, machine to machine.
And who issues this license?
So this license is issued by Department of Telecommunication.
Okay.
It's a soft touch regulation. It's more in the form of a registration, and the service providers are called as M2M service providers.
Okay.
This becomes relevant in fixing accountability. If you have a regulatory and a licensing mechanism, it need not be very stringent. If it's a soft touch mechanism, at least you would know that who is the service provider on whom the accountability could be fixed. What happens in case of licensing regime is that a licensee is the one on whom the responsibility for a network failure is fixed. I mean, TRAI comes out with quality of service regulations and all. A licensee may not be solely responsible. Under the contract, he can transfer the liability contractually on a subcontractor. However, under the license, that responsibility remains with him. So DOT, if was to take any action, it's the licensee who would be directly responsible, but the financial obligation, probably by way of a contract, he can shift it onto a subcontractor. So that's why a kind of regulatory or a licensing regime, even if it's soft touch, may be important for fixing accountability.
Right now in India, or generally, what is the infrastructure that is required for AI?
Infrastructure that is required for AI is something we in the telecommunication field, with the advent of 5G technologies, call as NGN. It's a new generation network.
Okay.
Now AI relies a lot on computing power. It needs immense computing power and processors, the processing power. To combine the hardware and the software, what you need is a robust network, and that we call as a next generation or a new generation network. So new generation network would, and for the purposes of AI, would be your data storage, which could be on cloud now. Physical data storage is very expensive, so now everything is shifting to cloud. Then you would have new set of processors. So processors with your cloud storage with a heavier network like a 5G or a 6G or a satellite network would be bare minimum that would be required for artificial intelligence, because it will be entirely network oriented. And for network, and considering the multimedia nature of the AI application that we are expecting to happen, because it's not, so in telecommunication we call something known as a triple play. Triple play is about voice, messaging and data, so or multimedia. I'll just give you a brief background how the industry has evolved and why and what is next generation technology. If you see technologically, there was a time when we were in analog era. An analog era was when we only had phone calls and SMSs that we could do. We shifted to the digital era. Digital era, transmission happened through ones and zeros, binary.
Yes.
From digital era, we progressed to internet era. We call it IP protocol, where the ones and zeros were packaged. So it was series of ones and zeros. And why series of ones and zeros become important, or internet protocol becomes important, because it's able to carry much more data. So it was, when we came to the digital era or IP protocol, it was not just about the calls and the voice calls or the messages, but it was also about multimedia content.
Okay.
Now for that we needed heavier bands. That's when India first started with 3G. Then we came to 4G. Now it's 5G. So as the
And now we're going to 6G?
6G. Because what happens is, for a technology, wireline may not be able to support it. Yes, we do have optical fiber cables and all. At the back end, certainly we need that. But how much of a cable are we going to lay down? So the idea is to leverage on the higher data bands, or what we call is contiguous spectrum. So even if a data band is at a lower frequency, we make it contiguous set so that it becomes a bigger pipe. We call them into a pipe. So in a 800 megahertz band, if we were able to combine contiguously small units of spectrum, we can create a larger channel for then pushing the multimedia or higher technologies. So I suppose that would constitute an NGN which becomes interestingly relevant for AI.
Okay. So do you think India has this infrastructure as of now?
That is very good. Okay, let me also answer the question over and above what Nitin has said. If you have to look at the artificial intelligence, very broad terms, what are the basic modules? The hardware. So you have the CPUs and the GPU, graphical processing units, which are required, which are very powerful units to be able to process, because as we spoke, artificial intelligence deals with a huge amount of data and a very, very fast.
What's the difference between CPU and GPU?
I'm not an expert on a technical part. There's a graphical processing unit and there's a computer part. Yeah, central processing. Yeah. Okay. So that's the thing. Then the software aspect of it. Then a data as storage and processing. That's huge, because you have to have a huge amount of data to be stored and then processed.
Yes.
And for that you require very high-end data centers which will be processing that. And then you require a network, right? The network and a network has to be very strong network with low latency, with edge computing, etc. So I think these are the four blocks.
So for example, you have satellites, so you must be having huge data processing facilities.
No. Data processing, see, data centers are different. So data centers are typically on the ground. So you bring the data into the data processing and then do that.
But
right?
your data must be processed on the ground.
Yeah, the satellites are actually used on two types of broadly. One is communication satellite, where there is not much of a data. You just use the satellite to capture.
You don't
the other one is that
Earth
Earth observation and navigation satellites.
Okay.
They are the ones who will be picking up a lot of Earth observation will have a lot of very high-end imagery of the Earth surface, radar data, thermal data, etc., which are getting picked up, and they ultimately have to get processed.
So who has these Earth navigation satellites?
Every country has it. There are multiple.
Like in India, who has it? Like
in India, it is ISRO.
ISRO has it.
That's correct.
So 2023 new space policy, how is it different from the old space policy, and how do you think it will benefit the development of AI in India?
Okay. See, if you really look at a space policy document, it doesn't specifically talk of AI. Okay, but having said that, and I'm not comparing with the past. I'm just trying to see what is happening in the new space policy. First is that it is giving a tremendous encouragement to private sector to get into the entire space segment. That's what I said, right? So it will be it manufacturing, launching of satellite, communication, R&D, all of it. So that is one part. Other is that okay, it is making the regulatory framework quite stable, so that people get more confidence in doing work on that. So that's the other part. It's also encouraging in terms of cooperation and with other countries, so that there is a exchange of knowledge and technologies that happen both sides, which is also very important to my mind. Very important, right? And if you look at globally today, this is a time that the innovation in space technology is at a peak. I'm not saying that it will not be better in future, could be better, but as of now, it is at a peak. Artificial intelligence also coming up, right? So therefore, I believe that today is a time where space technology is at its peak in terms of innovation, artificial intelligence coming up. In that scenario, when a new space policy comes and which encourages the private sector, apart from the government or agencies, for getting into the entire gamut of space ecosystem, I think it's very positive.
Do you think that besides regulation, do we need an AI policy like a space policy? Or do you think that Niti Aayog's AI strategy document is sufficient?
So I think the strategy document is a precursor to a policy.
Okay.
So I'm very sure with the immense potential that AI has, there is every likelihood that India would have a policy, and rightly so it should. Just to digress and just to add to what Mr. Nath said on the network and the infrastructure that is needed, what is most critical is the semiconductor.
Okay.
You see, for running any smart intelligent machine, we need semiconductor, and semiconductor is a backbone for telecommunications network as well, and also AI. So I just wanted to specifically point out, because the government's emphasis on semiconductor has been huge.
Yes.
And the way I look at the government is evolving the entire ecosystem is that each aspect of a higher technology or a advanced technology is being specifically targeted and addressed by the government. So we are augmenting our capacity on the infrastructure side, the basic elements for creating an infrastructure and the software, and then of course the software that would be riding on that.
Right.
So as I see it, India certainly should and rather would have an AI policy.
Okay. So then can you just also we're digressing a little bit, but semiconductors, government has taken many steps.
Yes.
Because that is one bottleneck which may be there. So can you just, for our viewers, get into a little bit of specifics? What exactly is the government doing for semiconductors?
As of now, broadly speaking, government is looking at two aspects on semiconductor. One is sourcing the raw materials for semiconductor. So government has been scouting, rather PSUs have been scouting around all over the globe for mines from where silicon and other ingredients of semiconductor can come. The second bit is incentivizing the private sector to come and invest. So we have a semiconductor incentive schemes that have been launched at a central level. Then each state has its own semiconductor scheme, or rather incentive mechanism, by which they are attracting private capital, and they are trying to augment capacity to have a chip industry in India. And that's happening at different levels. One is the manufacturing part. The second is also developing the soft side of the semiconductor, which is the programs that will ride on semiconductor. Now it's a very capital intensive industry, and I'm glad that government has been very proactive in giving some tax breaks and also funding for the purposes of semiconductor, because that becomes your backbone of any intelligent network or artificial intelligence that will ride on.
So do you think AI policy should come before regulation, or should it be parallel, or first you should have regulation? Because in the global context we already have AI.
Yes.
So what do you think? Which should come first, chicken, egg, or should it come same time?
So policy is more about the roadmap that the government presence to the industry. And policy lends a credibility or credence on the basis of which then investors contemplate doing their research.
Like,
and then
like your space policy.
Yes. And then comes the regulation which regulates the players in the market. So with my regulatory experience, I think it's always better to for policy to precede any regulation. Also the fact that today it's not like India doesn't have laws. Like the US, we may not have a specific AI law or an AI act, but we have what is called the technology agnostic laws. For example, your Information Technology Act, which very soon will be replaced with Digital India Act. Now, if you look at Digital India Act is specifically targeting newer technologies, because Information Technology Act has been decades old. And it is, though a technology agnostic act, it also applies to internet, but at the same time it is not enough to take care of artificial intelligence. And Digital India Act specifically also focuses on artificial intelligence. We still have to wait for the act to be finally notified and the rules to be framed. So that's one. We have already had our data protection laws changed in India. So we have something known as Digital Personal Data Protection Act in India. So there again, the focus is on the data, because data and privacy are two aspects very critical to artificial intelligence.
What do you think? Are you in favor of this multiplicity of agencies, or shouldn't there be just one agency to regulate? Now, for example, you're accountable to TRI, and you're also accountable to, Department of Space and there.
The way I see it is that I think every country has its own way of looking at regulations. Now, as an industry, we might have some preferences, etc. But then I'm sure there are reasons why the government has that. So I think that's a debate that keeps on happening between us and the industry.
Because Honorable Prime Minister keeps on, he keeps on telling, government officers and ministers and everything, we have to get out of these silos, So it should not be that this ministry is doing this and this ministry is doing that and this department is doing that.
So the way we see it is that it's not about having multiple ministries, but it's more about ease of doing business.
Yes.
Right. So for as an industry, if there's a ease of doing business, it doesn't matter whether there is one or two or three ministries which are involved, right? So as long there is a homogeneity, as long there is a clear handshake amongst all of them, so I think it works.
You wouldn't mind if you have one more AI regulatory agency. So you have AI regulatory agency, you have a TRI, and you have Department of Spaces agencies.
No, just to add to that, see, there's a difference. So when you talk about regulatory framework, we have a licensing framework and then we have regulations. Industry will not have any problem if there is ease of business and a single window clearance for getting into the sector.
Okay.
So that is what government has been emphasizing, and that is exactly what has happened in telecommunication and in other fields.
Okay.
So that's
you have a single window clearance.
Single window clearance. Once you have gotten into the country, then comes the regulation part. Now, regulators are experts. You can't expect a certain set of regulator to be an expert on everything. So either you create a separate regulatory body, or within the same regulatory body, you have a separate department. At the end of the day, you will need that people of expertise, separate wings. And considering these are multi-billion-dollar industries, so there's a huge that needs to be covered, right from the expertise on technology, regulation, laws. Plus, you also have international standards. Like for telecommunication, we have ITU, International Telecommunications Union. So similarly, there would be international bodies with which AI will have to relate. The Indian AI bodies will have to in sync. If there has to be a for now, when we talk about AI, it's mostly localized. I mean, it may be an OTT form, like over the top. It may be available on by downloading the apps and all. But there would be a time where probably the AI would be more seamless and transnational. It still is, but it is still considered to be localized, because at times they are required, like telecommunication operators are required to have local servers. So
yes.
Because of security issue, they may be required to have local servers. But as AI evolves, there is a possibility where internationally also at a treaty level, there might be some common standards. Now you would need an agency from India that keeps pace with what is happening internationally, and those best practices are then implemented within the sector in India. Now for one regulator to cover all aspects of it may not be easy.
Okay. So then can we just come to specifics? In the EU regulation, that is the latest regulation of August, do they have a separate AI agency? What do they envisage?
They have a comprehensive legislation that emphasizes stringent rules, and it is based on, or rather it is human centric and based on risk approach. So they have classified AIs into different risks that AIs pose, right from unacceptable risk to high risk, medium risk, and rather no risk. The emphasis in that AI Act is that those technologies which present no risk. Now, risk could be a risk to ethical risk, then it could be a human centric risk, and then of course it could be a risk which may be in the nature of threat to security. So where those risks are not present, there the emphasis is to keep it unregulated, rather soft touch regulation. As the risk level rises, there are higher obligations that are then imposed.
But how is it different from the Japanese regulation is also in place, or it's in process?
Japan has adopted a soft touch regulation.
Okay, it's already in place.
In place, but as I said, since AI is evolving, so they may also evolve their laws.
Okay.
Just like in India, even US, even Japan, they've had technology agnostic laws where data protection and privacy laws are almost everywhere. So they apply to all technologies when it comes to protecting data.
But US is also in the process of having their AI regulation.
Yeah, for now they don't have it. From what I understand, they have these executive orders which are a commitment to having an AI legislation in place. They have, currently in the US, they have left it to the sectors to develop their own AI standards. So they are sector specific. Europe is risk specific and a comprehensive centralized legislation. Japan, as you mentioned, is on the other spectrum where it is prioritizing innovation and it is going slow, or I would say less stringent on regulations.
There is this apprehension that AI will, take away jobs of many people. In fact, even now the coders are saying that, now you don't need to, be a coder. AI can do that. So, because you have experience in satellite communication and in other communication technologies, in your career span, you would have seen how jobs, 20 years ago, certain kind of jobs did not exist, and 20 years ago, the certain jobs that were sought after do not exist now. So, can you give your vision?
I think what may happen is that some of the existing jobs may get displaced, but I think some new jobs will get created. That's one. Second thing that to myself, if I was a top view, is that the way you do things could change. So initially maybe you're just doing coding, but today if artificial intelligence is allowing to doing a lot of things that you would have done, can you move to a next level of how to leverage that to go to the next level? I think that is how the reskilling and and getting into newer areas would come up. So that's a phase. Yeah,
you need reskilling. Yeah. So what would I'm just off the cuff, like suppose right now computer science in IIT is one of the most sought after courses. So it may still be it may not be it might be a focus on AI instead of a focus on.
I mean, I don't think so. AI means that everything else is going to be dead, right? So I think that will be maybe a more specialized. I'm not really from the academic field, but I would say that if this is becoming a very important segment, there will be more specializations happening on that. That's because ultimately AI is part of the overall computer science thing. So I think that's the way it's going to happen.
We talk a lot about AI, but the nitty-gritty is something a lot of us don't know about. So thank you very much. We have learned a lot. At least I have learned a lot. So I hope our viewers will also learn a lot. But do you think anything should be added that the viewers should know?
AI in different forms will always be there. And I think the way I said, we'll see more of it as we go along. It will be part of life very soon for all of us.
Nitin, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah. So as Mr. Nath said, that AI will become ubiquitous part of our lives, and what I was pleasantly surprised from the legal landscape to see was how adaptive we were to newer technology. When COVID happened, courts in India went online.
Yes.
And it was remarkable to see how seamlessly we have continued to conduct the court proceedings. So I'm very hopeful.
The disposal was faster.
Absolutely. No, and it also reduced the time that was spent traveling. So in a way, it made lawyers much more efficient. They could devote much more time onto the matters, and it made it easier for judges to have assistance of lawyers from all across India.
Yes.
So I feel that it's a very positive sign, and with the emphasis that the government has on becoming a $1 trillion digital economy and AI, I think that India is all set to be a global leader.
So this has been a very enlightening discussion. At least for me, I have learned so much about AI and various facets of AI, and I hope the viewers also liked it. But please give us our feedback, because this, as I said in the beginning, is the first part of our series. So how will we go forward? It's like AI. It will develop as we go forward. So we really like feedback from our viewers, and so namaskar, and keep watching Sansad TV.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.